वक्रतुंडा महाकाय कोटि सूर्य समप्रभा निर्विघ्नं कुरु मे देव
सर्वकार्येषु सर्वदा. Honorable Chief Guest, respected guests of honor, invited dignitaries and delegates. On behalf of Nittay Deemed to be University, I, Dr. Shilpa, your host for the day, extend to you all a very warm welcome. Today, we are celebrating the inception of Celomics Laboratory, inaugurated by our Honorable Chancellor, Sir Vinay Hegde, at Central Research Laboratory, K.S. Hegde Medical Academy this morning, as a prelude to the Japan Society for Promotion of Science, MEXT Government of Japan sponsored project entitled Studies on Pregnancy, Delivery and Child Development Pattern in Water Contaminated Areas of India with a funding of approximately 1.35 crores. Marching forward with the quantum
and our guests of honors, Professor M. Shantram Shetty, Dr. Satish Kumar Bandari, Dr. M.S. Moditaya, and Mr. Rajendra Prasad. Ladies and gentlemen, as we are now joined by dignitaries on the dais, let us now begin this inaugural ceremony by seeking the blessing of the Lord Almighty with a prayer song by Dr. Niriksha, Mrs. Vinodini and Ms. Ranjita. I request all of you to kindly rise for the invocation.
तनुजाते जय हे कर्नाटक माते जय सुंदर नदिवनಗಳ ನಾಡೆ जय हे रस ऋषिಗಳ ಬೀಡೆ जय भारत जननीय तनुजाते जय हे कर्नाटक माते ಭೂದೇವಿಯ ಮುಕುಟದ ನವಮಣಿಯೇ ಗಂಧದ ಚಂದದ ಹೊನ್ನಿನ ಗಣಿಯೇ ರಾಘವ ಮಧುಸೂದನರವತರಿಸಿದ ಭಾರತ ಜನನಿಯ ತನುಜಾತೆ ಜಯ ಭಾರತ ಜನನಿಯ ತನುಜಾತೆ ಜಯ ಹೇ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಮಾತೆ ಜನನಿಯ ಜೋಗುಳ ವೇದದ ಘೋಷ ಜನನಿಗೆ ಜೀವವು ನಿನ್ನಾವೇಶ ಹಸುರಿನ ಗಿರಿಗಳ ಸಾಲೆ ನಿನ್ನಯ ಕೊರಳಿನ ಮಾಲೆ ಕಪಿಲ ಪತಂಜಲ ಗೌತಮ ಜಿನನುತ ಭಾರತ ಜನನಿಯ ತನುಜಾತೆ ಜಯ ಹೇ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಮಾತೆ ಸರ್ವ ಜನಾಂಗದ ಶಾಂತಿಯ ತೋಟ ರಸಿಕರ ಕಂಗಳ ಸೆಳೆಯುವ ನೋಟ ಹಿಂದೂ ಕ್ರೈಸ್ತ ಮುಸಲ್ಮಾನ ಪಾರಸಿಕ ಜೈನರುದ್ಯಾನ ಜನಕನ ಹೋಲುವ ದೊರೆಗಳ ಧಾಮ ಗಾಯಕ ವೈಣಿಕರ ರಾಮ ಕನ್ನಡ ನುಡಿ ಕುಣಿದಾಡುವ ಗೇಹ ಕನ್ನಡ ತಾಯಿಯ ಮಕ್ಕಳ ದೇಹ ಭಾರತ ಜನನಿಯ ತನುಜಾತೆ ಜಯ ಹೇ ಕರ್ನಾಟಕ ಮಾತೆ ಜಯ ಸುಂದರ ನದಿವನಗಳ ನಾಡೆ जय हे रस ऋषि गणबीड जय भारत जननीय तनु जाते जय हे कर्नाटक माते जय भारत जय भारत जय भारत जननीय तनु जाते.
Thank you, Dr. Niriksha, Mrs. Vinodini and Ms. Ranjita. To formally welcome you all, giving us a gift of your presence today, we have the welcome address. Please join me in welcoming to the lectern, Professor Fatima De Silva, Principal Newens and Chairman, NITTE SSP Forum. A big round of applause to Dr. Fatima De Silva.
A very good morning to all of you. Honorable Chancellor, distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues from various constituent colleges, dear students, ladies and gentlemen. September 15th, 2016 marked a significant day wherein a historic partnership was signed by two eminent visionaries, our Honorable Chancellor Shri N. Vinay Hegde and Dr. Ikino Tsuyomo, President, University of Miyazaki, which led to the origin of the NITTE Sakura Science Forum. I know that my colleagues and I share the same feeling of excitement and optimism when we recall the wonderful possibilities which bloomed due to this beautiful collaborative venture. 51 beneficiaries, and I think many more, of various constituent institutions of NITTE deemed to be university from various disciplines were able to enrich their academic career and research pursuit along with establishing a strong social cohesiveness among the two reputed universities. Today we have another significant milestone, the inauguration of the Indo-Japan Lab, Silomics, a project which is made possible through the sincere efforts of great luminaries, namely Dr. Harish Kumar Madhyastha, the Faculty of Medicine, University of Miyazaki, and the adjunct faculty of NITTE deemed to be university, Dr. Sucheta Kumari, and a proactive team from the CRL lab, Dr. Shipra, Dr. Shilpa Shetty, Dr. Prashant B. Nayak. I take this opportunity to congratulate you all for this great achievement and extend a warm and cordial welcome to each one of you and wish you all success through this endeavor. On this memorable day, we have amidst us our beloved Chancellor, Shri Vinay Hegde, who is our strength as well as our inspiration to achieve great strides in the university. Sir, your vision for continued excellence and motivation to explore new opportunities for the benefit of mankind has earned NITTE University its reputation nationally as well as internationally. On behalf of the entire fraternity of the NITTE family, I extend a heartfelt welcome to you, sir. We are honored by the presence of our Pro-Chancellor, Dr. Shantaram Shetty, and Mr. Vishal Hegde in his absence, our Vice-Chancellor, Dr. Satish Kumar Bandari, our Pro-Vice-Chancellor, Dr. Muditaya. We are grateful for the tremendous dedication and the unfailing support rendered to all of us. Your participation has doubled our joy on this occasion. A hearty welcome to you, sirs. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome the chief guest of today's auspicious event, Dr. Yoshiki Kuroda, Chairman, Department of Public Health, Dr. Sawade Hirotake, Department of Pediatric, Faculty of Medicine, Dr. Junsuke Muraoka, an eminent researcher from University of Miyazaki, from the Department of OBG, who is specialized in molecular biology and currently working in the Department of Public Health. Your constant support, sirs, have resulted in this fruitful outcome. A hearty welcome to you all. I acknowledge the presence of our dignitaries from the university, Sir Rajendra, as well as several esteemed officials from various colleges, the deans of various institutions, the faculty, the students who have come in large numbers to grace this beautiful occasion. We are extremely privileged to have you all on this beautiful day. A hearty welcome to you all. Dear friends and colleagues, let this day be a cherishable moment in our lives and fill us with the passion to never stop in our pursuit of building a stronger and healthier nation with great discoveries and improvements. Thank you, and once again, a gracious welcome to all. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for that warm welcome. Floral welcome is our tradition, but today it's going to be even more special as these floral bouquets are specially handcrafted by the students from Lion Special School, Surathkal. I would like to call upon Dr. Sucheta Kumari N to hand over a floral bouquet to our presiding officer for the day, our Honorable Chancellor, Sir M. Vinay Hegde. I would like to call upon Dr. Prashant Naik to hand over a floral bouquet to our chief guest for the day, Dr. Harish Kumar Madhyastha. Now I would like to call upon Dr. Shipra Sonkusari to hand over a floral bouquet to our chief guest for the day, Professor Dr. Savada Sensei. I would like to call upon Dr. Seema to hand over a floral bouquet to our chief guest for the day, Kuroda Sensei. I would like to call upon Dr. Tanmay Bhatt to hand over a floral bouquet to our guest of honor for the day, our Honorable Pro-Chancellor, Dr. M. Shantram Shetty. I would like to call upon Dr. Audrey to hand over a floral bouquet to our guest of honor for the day, Dr. Satish Kumar Bandari. I would like to call upon Dr. Zulfia to hand over a floral bouquet to our guest of honor for the day, our Honorable Pro Vice Chancellor, Dr. M.S. Proditaya. I would like to call upon Dr. Praveen Kumar Shetty, Director R&D, to hand over a floral bouquet to Mr. Rajendra, Director of Finance, NITEDU. Now I would like to call upon Dr. Prashant Shetty to hand over a bouquet to Moroka Sensei. Thank you all. Light is a testament in ensuring positive energy in any occasion. To start us off on this auspicious note with the divine blessings, we have the lamp lighting ceremony, and may I now request our esteemed chief guest and the dignitaries on the dais to join us in the customary traditional lighting of the lamp and symbolically inaugurating this program. thank you all for doing the honors. The University of Miyazaki, Japan and Nittei DU Mangaluru exchanged a memorandum of understanding in 2016 laying foundation for active research cooperation between the two universities, and this is followed by the visit of more than 50 faculties and students to the University of Miyazaki, Japan. It is indeed a pride today in inviting the flag bearer, the pioneer himself, Dr. Harish Kumar Madhyastha, who is also the Japan PI of the Indo-Japan Mixed Project, to the lectern to present the opening remarks on the Nittei Miyazaki academic cohesion, which is zooming towards its 10th anniversary.
So, very good morning to everybody. Respected Chancellor Sir Vinay Hegdeji, Vice Chancellor Professor Satish Kumar Bandari, Pro Chancellor Professor Shantaram Shetty, and Pro Vice Chancellor Professor Meditaya, and all others. And my dear faculty friends, especially Sakura Science members, those who have visited our university through to 2016 till 2019. It's all started long back around 2015. One of your faculty, now Dean Professor Anirban Chakravarti, first visited us and ignited the MOU between two universities. From there, trajectory of the development, cohesiveness, friendship between two universities started. As rightly mentioned, 2016 was the milestone between two universities in the form of MOU. From there, small projects, research collaborations, joint publications. Importantly, first time in Nittei University, we have copyright publications with the Vice Chancellor on Varexellum indica. Subsequently, 3 publications. It's already had 5 citations. Thank you, sir, for your insight. In the 2014, he told, let's start something with the traditional medicine. That medicine is published already, and probably we may go for the patent later on in the later stages. And Nittei and my Karma Bhumi is Japan. Of course, Janma Bhumi is Nittei next to Udupi. Always we should have some linking programs throughout. So morning our chairman, chairman of this group, Professor Kuroda, he was mentioning about extension of this activity will be taking place in the next coming years as a phase 2 activity. And I am sure Nittei will be a satellite point for that activity throughout India. At present, we are concentrating on the 3 district level. Probably it will lead into the intra-state level, including northeast states of India. So we are sincerely trying, sir, for all our effort to get big projects, probably $1 trillion yen, we don't know. And Nittei, I'm sure, will support with all help. And it should be a Miyazaki Nittei joint effort for the development of the society through the medical science. Once again, thank you very much, Chancellor Sir, for all your kind support and mentorship for this activity. And I wish all the best and very bright future in the academic and public life. Thank you once again. Thank you all. Arigatou gozaimashita.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your thoughts. To fuel our thoughts, may now request our Honorable Pro-Chancellor, Nittei DU Professor Dr. Shantaram Shetty, to address the gathering.
Good morning. Good morning to each one of you. I'm indeed thrilled to go through the new lab, the Cellomics, this morning. And it was not only enlightening, but it showed what people can do in a small space of time if they want to do things. Our esteemed Chancellor, Mr. Vinay Deji, the galaxy of guests who have come from Japan, Dr. Madhyastha, our own, Dr. Shuko Kurada, Dr. Sawada Hiroteke, and our own colleagues, members of the staff, dear students. Indo-Japan collaboration is a great collaboration. If you take the history of mankind, perhaps the two greatest countries which have a hierarchy of its own, history of its own. After all, United States has a history of just 400 years. If you go through the history, it is Japan and India which have some of the oldest history of mankind. Though because of the Second World War, though we had very close ties because of reasons beyond our two countries, we fell apart for a time. But it is indeed gratifying that we are joining together because we have so much in common. Because we were the first country where Buddhism was taken very seriously. And to remind the students here, Nirvana, which is preached by Buddhists, and also the control of greed and hatred, which is the main theme of Lord Gautam Buddha, is practiced literally by India and Japan. So it is indeed gratifying that with the Sutradhara Dr. Madhyastha, through Nittei University and Megasaki University, we have formed the Cellomics Indo-Japan Laboratory. I was thrilled by the fact that the main theme of research will be on groundwater studies. It may be well water, it may be borewell water, it may be river water, it may be whatever water we consume every day, which has led from time immemorial to different types of disorders, including genetic disorders. Though many studies have been undertaken, whether it is in arsenic, cadmium, lead, so many metals which are a part of the earth per se, it is time that we work on the preventive aspect more than the real finding the fault. And we will have to find out how to prevent this rather than treat the genetic disorders, which is a very, very colossal task. We are indeed happy that this team is headed by a preventive medicine person who knows how to prevent diseases, and he has been accompanied by an obstetrician and a pediatrician. And with our team of pediatricians and gynecologists and the preventive medicine and our dean, we should be able to do a great job, and at least to prevent these disorders which can cause a calamity to the society at large. On behalf of Nittei University, I again repeat that we are very proud of you, headed by our Dean, Dr. Prakash, Dr. Praveen, Dr. Sucheta, and all the team. I won't mention in detail. You have done a great job. If you could find out one genetic disorder which has been caused by this disorder of consuming the water, we have done a great job. And if you could prevent one child having a disorder, we would have done a great job. I end this with a small story. Mr. Vinay Hegde is the question my friend asked was, can we do, this is a very colossal job, very big job in a country like ours, where there is air pollution, where there is any pollution you name, the food pollution and the groundwater pollution, every other pollution. Can we really do something about it? I'm reminded of this small story. Mr. Vinay Hegde is very fond of going for morning walks in his beach, and one day when he was walking on the beach with his friend, a storm came and lot of fishes came into the shore. And Mr. Vinay Hegde bent and put one fish into the water, and he did the second time. His accompanying friend asked him, "What are you doing, Mr. Hegde? There are thousands of fishes here, and they are all really babbling for life. Is it possible that you could put all those 1,000 fishes back to the water?" Mr. Hegde, in his own inimitable way, said, he picked up a fish again. For this fish, it makes a difference, and put it into the water. So that is the whole philosophy of our small lab which is going to come in, and whatever little we can do, and we shall do it. And again, congratulating the whole team. And again, on behalf of all of us, we are with you, and let us march forwards very firm in our faith to see that the Celomix comes in a very national level to serve the people of this great country. Thank you very much again.
Thank you, sir, for your words of inspiration and appreciation. May I now request our beloved Vice Chancellor, Dr. Satish Kumar Bandari, an inspiration for all of us, to address the gathering.
Very good morning to each one of you gathered here on this very auspicious occasion. The presiding officer of today's very, very important program, our most revered, respected, Honorable Chancellor, Shri N.V. Hegde ji, Pro-Chancellor, Professor M. Shantaram Shetty, and all my colleagues from the university, guests for the day, Professor Dr. Yoshiki Kuroda from the Department of Public Health, University of Miyazaki, Dr. Sawada Hirotoke, Department of Pediatric Nursing from University of Miyazaki, and Mr. Muroka, his obstetrics and gynecologist, heads of institutions, members of the Sakura Science Forum. This Sakura Science Forum was started when we came back from Japan in the year 2018. Probably only one university start in the university level, Sakura Science Forum. First of all, I should congratulate Professor Madhyastha for introducing NITA University to Miyazaki University. It's a really historical day for all of us in NITA University, because this journey started in the year 2016, or as he said, with having MOU between two important universities, between Japan and India. The MOU, which are usually MOUs die down, because we are having more than 65 MOUs between various universities from USA, UK, Europe, Southeast Asia, Japan, and even Australia. Out of all these 65 universities, according to me, the most proactive, active, and vibrant MOU is between Miyazaki University and NITA University. This is all because of Professor Madhyastha, who is constantly working towards making this MOU to happen. How it started, Dr. Professor Madhyastha brought luminaries, very important key persons from Miyazaki University to NITA University, including the president of Miyazaki University, Professor Ikinova. He came here and he participated in our convocation, he was the guest. And many luminaries from Miyazaki University, and not only faculty visiting from Miyazaki University to Nitta University, he invited faculty from Nitta University constituent colleges, mainly medical and biomedical science and nursing science. I am very glad to tell you that 51 of us, including me, had the opportunity to visit Miyazaki University. Nursing faculty, medical college faculty, particularly because Sakura Science Forum is part of the JST, Japanese Science Technology Forum. This encourages young scientists, because one of the criteria to get selected is they should less than 40 years. So always it encourages young scientists and inculcates scientific inquisitiveness among the faculty and continuous interaction. So with that intention, as soon as we came back, then it was followed by our nursing college, biomedical science. Already with Anirban, we had connection with Miyazaki University. The totally around 50 plus people had opportunity to visit Miyazaki University. Then we thought, why can't we start a Sakura Science Forum? Sakura is a very important flower of Japan. It blooms only in particular month, in April, May. When we went there, it was just end of the season, and it blooms only for 2 to 3 months. Fantastic, very wonderful flower, and they got lot of importance for Sakura. So all these exchanges, all this program under JST is named after Sakura, and Sakura Science Forum is there in the Japanese Government of India program also, and lot of activities happened after that. I had a plant in my village, what you call Oroxylum indicum, which has got anti-cancer property, and it is being used by native healers to treat cancer. Then I happened to meet Madhyastha when he came here, and we sent the bark of that plant to Japan, to Miyazaki University. Then we had some studies here, but I am really grateful to Madhyastha. He took that pain of taking that sample in spite of risk, and we did the study on that particular plant, and we have found that is as good as some of the very important metabolized used for cancer. Unfortunately, we could not patent it, and things are happening in the right direction, and I hope, and already 3 publications have come from that particular research, and we hope to get patent of that particular product. It may come to the market. So I request the cooperation from the Miyazaki University research ecosystem to support this program. One more very important day or the milestone in the history of Sakura Science Forum and JST is starting of Cellomix Lab, and I should again congratulate Sucheta Kumari and her team and Madhyastha and his colleagues from Miyazaki University, and I also recognize the presence of Harikrishna Bhatt, who is instrumental in bringing Japan and our Nitta University closer. Thank you, Harish Madhyastha, for taking a lot of pains. I think in the morning he was talking about so many medical schools in Japan, in and around Miyazaki. He said a lot of opportunities there for collaboration between the various universities in Japan. Just I was talking to Harikrishna Bhatt and said, one of the dependable partners is Japanese people. As our Pro-Chancellor said, we have got probably that ancient ties between these 2 countries being again groomed with our Prime Minister visit and visit of the Premier from Japan to India, and we have got lot of connections, and Japanese science technology, and now Japan Science Research Forum, again it's supporting various activities of Indian universities. I hope we'll take this opportunity, and with my colleagues' support, particularly from the members of the medical school, faculty of the medical school and biomedical science and nursing science, and we'll explore the possibility of having more collaboration between the Department of Public Health of Miyazaki University, Pediatric Department and OBG. And today at 3 o'clock we'll be having some closed door meeting with the heads of the department of these 3 departments, and I already talked to the guests. They said lot of opportunities there for collaboration, and I'll tell you one very important thing what happened, because all these MOUs should be very productive. One of the very important thing what happened after a visit to Miyazaki University, I think our pediatric colleagues and OBG colleagues who visited the Miyazaki hospital, we saw that because there they take care of the newborn. Neonatology department is very, very sophisticated, and they do a lot of work. Even 500, 600 gram newborns also taken care, and they make it to thrive. That's one of the best department what we saw, and we got some very good technology from Miyazaki hospital, and I understand it's being practiced in our hospital, particularly hypothermia in newborn, and we have succeeded in around 700 gram, 800 grams children, newborns being treated in our neonatal department. In the afternoon, we'll be taking the guests to the Department of Neonatology, and we'll see how those technology being adopted in our hospital, and this MOU between various universities, how can we really put into practice so that we can help our patients, particularly patients. And as our Pro-Chancellor said, this is very, very important program, particularly for treating the contamination, what's happening in the groundwater. I think all of you know that the water is being explored without any regulations. Being bore wells are widely used in this part of the world, and we are going to geosatellite mapping of these areas where these bore wells are placed, and is one of the most sophisticated scientific studies going to happen. It's going to help preventive, promotive, and curative aspect of health in the maternal and child health. It's one of the very important projects. I request Madhyasa and his colleagues who have come from his guests who have come from Miyazaki University to help us in taking it forward, and probably Nitta University will become one of the nodal center for doing all these studies, and we'll be happy to collect the samples from various parts of India and other universities and support this project. I wish you all the best for this project. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, sir. Now, we have curated a small felicitation ceremony for our delegations from the University of Miyazaki, Japan. Nitte deemed to be university takes pride in honoring our Japanese delegations, Kuroda Sensei, Sawada Sensei, and Muraoka Sensei, acknowledging their continuous support towards the Indo-Japan MEX project and for their valuable presence here today. May I now request Dr. Gunimala Chakraborty, member, Nitte Sakura Science Forum, to perpetuate the citation ceremony.
Respected dignitaries of the days, ladies and gentlemen, and their students. It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Dr. Yoshiki Kuroda to this august audience. Professor Dr. Yoshiki Kuroda completed his education at the University of Occupational and Environmental Health, Japan in 1985. He then worked as a resident in Department of Otolaryngology, Hospital of UOEH till 1991. Then he was leveled up to an assistant professor in the same hospital until 1996. He then joined University of Miyazaki in the year 2000 and has been serving the university since then. He is the professor and chairman of Department of Public Health, Faculty of Medicine, University of Miyazaki. He has more than 70 publications in reputed journals in the field of life science, hygiene, public health, both laboratory and environmental based health toxicology, epidemiology. He has authored several books on environmental health and overcoming the environmental health. He has also received several grants in aid for his scientific work. Nitte, deemed to be university, takes pride in honoring Dr. Professor Yoshiki Kuroda for his outstanding contributions in the field of life science, hygiene, and public health. K.S. Hegre Medical Academy on the 12th September 2022. I request the dignitaries to do the honor.
Plant that is being presented, it is a geotagged plant which will be later planted in the Nitte campus.
What is truth? What is...
Now, I would like to introduce Professor Dr. Hirotake Sawada to the audience. Professor Dr. Hirotake Sawada graduated MBBS in 1995 and completed a PhD in medicine in 2006. He works as a medical doctor in Department of Pediatrics, Faculty of Medicine, University of Miyazaki. He also functions as a professor in the Department of Fundamental Nursing, Faculty of Medicine, University of Miyazaki. He currently serves in the Board of Certification of Pediatric Endocrinology and Metabolism and Inborn Errors of Metabolism. He has 31 publications in his credit, which include 12 original research papers, 13 case reports, 5 review articles, and 1 book chapter in reputed peer-reviewed international journals. As a pediatrician, Hirotake Sawada works for the normal growth and development of children worldwide. His main research focus is neonatal screening projects for newborn errors of metabolism. He is one of the co-investigators of the Indo-Japan MEX project entitled Studies on Pregnancy, Delivery, and Child Development Pattern in Water-Contaminated Area of India, sponsored by Japan Society for Promotion of Science, MEX, Government of Japan. Nitte, deemed to be university, takes pride in honoring Professor Dr. Hirotake Sawada for his outstanding contributions in the field of normal growth and development of children worldwide, and also for his continuous support towards the Japan MEX project on the inaugural location of Celomics Laboratory at Central Research Laboratory, K.H. Hegre Medical Academy on the 12th September 2022. It is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Junsuke Muraoka. Dr. Junsuke Muraoka graduated MD in 2012 from the Faculty of Medicine, University of Miyazaki, and completed PhD in Medicine in 2022 from the Graduate School of Medicine, University of Miyazaki. He has more than 10 years of research experience in the Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology, Faculty of Medicine, University of Miyazaki. Currently, he is working in the Department of Gynecology, Chiba Cancer Center, and he is also a visiting researcher at the University of Miyazaki. He has 5 publications in his credit in reputed international peer-reviewed journals. He is one of the co-investigators of the Indo-Japan MEX project entitled Studies on Pregnancy, Delivery, and Child Development Pattern in Water-Contaminated Area of India, sponsored by Japan Society for Promotion of Science, MEX, Government of Japan. Nitte, deemed to be university, takes pride in honoring Dr. Junsuke Muraoka for his contributions and continuous support towards the Japan MEX project on the inaugural location of Celomics Laboratory at Central Research Laboratory, K.S. Hegre Medical Academy on the 12th September 2022.
Thank you, Dr. Gunimala.
I'll just thank. I thank all the dignitaries for doing the honors, and arigatou gozaimashita and yokoso Nitte University for the Japanese guest.
Now is the time that we all have been waiting for. May I now request Kuroda Sensei to address the gathering. Please join us in welcoming Kuroda Sensei.
Good morning. Nice to everybody. Thank you for introduction for me and inviting us this ceremony. I'm Yoshiki Kuroda from the Miyazaki University, Japan. We were pleased to admit opening ceremony of the Nitte Mia Ceramics Laboratory. Congratulations. It is great honor for me to meet the President and the Vice President, Chancellor, and ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy that I can address the greeting for everybody. I'm sure to keep in mind for a long time and a good experience. And this laboratory is very symbol of the cooperation between the Nitte University and the Miyazaki University. Both universities concluded the memorandum of the understanding, and we hope the opening this laboratory could be an opportunity to deepen friendship and exchange relation. Both universities are rooted in each region, engage in education and research, and I have to work to correspond the social problem of the region. Our important mission is supporting the development of the region where each university is placed. Nitte University and Miyazaki University are more than 6,000 kilometers each other. This year, 2022, but this year, 2022, marks the 70th anniversary of the establishment of the diplomatic relation between the India and Japan. There were many Japanese companies in Mangaluru. We were familiar and closely related each other. I'm very happy. We were very pleased that we can make a new cornerstone of Nitte University and Miyazaki University at the anniversary year. Mentioned in the opening message earlier, in September 2018, the former president of Miyazaki University, Ikenoue, visited in this university and attended the Nitte Miyazaki Conclave 2018 and deepened the exchange relation and friendship. At that time, all Japanese attendees shocked with hearing many children were suffering from the side effect of the pesticide endosulfan. At that time, they feel to need new joint research by the both university. Now, University of Miyazaki participated in the large-scale birth cohort study. This is a national environment and children study. This study is covering all over Japan and is unprecedented in the world. This study is investigate the effect of the chemical substance in the environment on children's health. Therefore, we feel and find out children's health is most important for the next generation. I want to contribute to keep child health using this experience. This opening ceremony is the starting point to our future friendship. From now, by Dr. Harish Kumar, he's here, and he has continued to interact through the exchange program as Sakura Science and others, and is sure to progress the joint research. I believe through these activity and the relation, we have to proceed deepened next stage. Based on this friendship, we hope to introduce future cooperated research with both university and try to keep child health through the Nitte Mia Ceramics Laboratory. We have to introduce to further deepen exchange relation between the two universities. Thank you for inviting us this ceremony. And I have to say to everybody, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Another feather to the cap further strengthening our bond with the University of Miyazaki, Japan, is the Indo-Japan International Conference on Future Health Strategy by transdisciplinary approach and a national level pre-conference workshop which will be held between 23rd to 25th of January 2023, organized by Department of Physiology and Central Research Laboratory, Kshema. May I now call upon Dr. Damodar Gowda to give an insight of the conference and the conference web page.
Honorable Chancellor of our esteemed university, Shri N. Vinay Hegde sir, respected Chancellor, no. Respected Vice Chancellor, respected Pro Vice Chancellor, and the dignitaries on the dais and off the dais. Very happy morning to everyone. So it's my privilege to announce that the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India, and the Japanese Society for Promotion of Science, the Government of Japan, jointly approved and funded our proposal for organizing an international conference here in our Nittei University. I'm happy that at all India level, only 3 proposals got sanctioned. One is ours, and other 2 being the proposal submitted by the Indian Institute of Technology, Madras, in collaboration with the Nagaoka University of Technology, Japan, and the Sanjay Gandhi Postgraduate Institute of Medical Sciences, Lucknow, in collaboration with Hokkaido University, Japan. So our proposal was submitted in collaboration with the Miyazaki University, wherein Professor Nozomi Watanabe, the Professor of Cardiology, as the PI, and Dr. Harish Kumar Madhyastha as the co-PI. Both were from the Department of Cardiovascular Physiology at the University of Miyazaki. And from Indian side, myself as the PI from the Department of Physiology, K.S. Hegde Medical Academy, Nittei, deemed to be university. The theme of the proposal is the future health strategy by transdisciplinary approach. The primary goal of this conference is to create awareness and interest among the young scientists, researchers, and the clinicians of India as well as the Japan, and to provide new or to get a new knowledge in the field of nanomedicine, to expand the scientific knowledge in the field of nanomedicine. So this conference will be organized with the support from the team of Professor Dr. Sujata Kumari N, the Central Research Laboratory, and the Kshema, Department of Physiology especially, and the Nittei University. So in connection with this, to initiate the procedure for the conference, I request our Honorable Chancellor to launch the website of international conference going to be conducted here. I request the Chancellor. Sir, please come here. It's illegal.
Which is the button I should press?
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for the International Indo-Japan Conference to be held between January 23rd to 25th, 2023.
Thank you so much.
Let us now be informed and be inspired. I now request His Excellency Sir N. Vinay Hegde to give away the presidential address.
Good morning. Dr. Yoshiki Kuroda, Dr. Swada Hirotek, Dr. Name is missing. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry if I have not pronounced your name correctly. Please accept my apologies. Dr. Shantaram Shetty, Dr. Satish Bhandari, Dr. Muditaya, Dr. Madhyastha, Mr. Hare Krishna Bhatt, my dear students. It's a rare privilege to participate in a function when this university is about to sign a MOU with Miyazaki University. As the Vice Chancellor highlighted, possibly this is largely due to the help Harikumar Madhyastha has extended to this university. Dr. Shantaram Shetty did mention about the long-standing relationship between India and Japan. Our Vice Chancellor expressed the various programs which this university and Miyazaki University is going to sign, and about which possibly will do a lot of good to the future generation. I would restrict myself to tell the guests about Nitte Deemed University and Nitte Education Trust. My association with the Nitte Education Trust possibly goes back to 42, 43 years. From a very small school with about 27, 28 students. Today possibly it is among the larger group of education institutions offering multiple education from medicine, dentistry, engineering and various other subjects. The growth of this university to me is phenomenal. I congratulate all the people, especially Dr. Shantaram Shetty, who has done a lot of hand-holding from the day one this medical college has started. Today we are signing a MOU which possibly will set the trend for research in this campus. I understand this university today is in the process of building a very large research lab, which I understand is about 1,25,000 square feet. Possibly it will be handed over to the research department by 15th of May 2023. Many good things are happening, I'm very sure Dr. Madhyastha, especially the Miyazaki University, will continue their relationship with us. We greatly value the research importance which Japan gives, both in the engineering field and in the medicine, maybe multiple other areas. Dr. Madhyastha did make a mention that the lab which is just inaugurated by by Mr. Kuroda, I understand is going to be a nodal point. From various universities in India, they will come, do research with our researchers, and I assure Miyazaki University, the Nitte Deemed University will extend all possible cooperation for students who come from other places. I'm very sure multiple universities will associate themselves with us, largely because they will get the benefit of the experience this university is going to get because of the signing of agreement with Miyazaki University. I for one, basically believe there's a lot to learn from Japanese, because their hard work, the amount of changes which has happened in Japan after 1945 is mind-boggling. A country which was almost destroyed, today among the top 3 countries in the world. And this is something we Indians must try to understand, that we are now signing an agreement with a country which is among the top 2-3 top countries in the world. And I'm sure every child, every faculty will make use of the opportunity Miyazaki University has offered you. I especially thank Dr. Madhyastha. Madhyastha, he did mention for the last about 8-9 years, has been coming here. Whenever he came on holiday, he spent half of his holiday in this campus. And I'm grateful to him. I'm very grateful to him This association, though is between Miyazaki and Nittei Deemed University, the architect of this signing to me is Dr. Madhyastha. I am also grateful to Mr. Hari Krishna Bhattu sitting in front of me. He is bringing an association. So I would like to tell you we have about 30 separate different colleges with about 25 to 27,000 students, and out of which about 6,000-7,000 pass out of this campus either as undergraduate professionals or postgraduate professionals. This is phenomenal because in a time scale of 40 years, what this university, the management of this institute, especially the Vice Chancellor, the Pro-Vice Chancellor, and again, sorry for repeating, my close friend Dr. Shantaram Shetty has done, is obviously, though many people refer my name, of course, I have a small role to play. But there is another gentleman who is sitting in the podium, Mr. Rajendra, who provides the money for all this development. And these things could not have happened not for his help. He has been so much proactive. Yesterday we were talking something very important, and he asked one thing about him is you ask him something within 3-4 hours, he has an answer for my problems. And I'm grateful to him, and the university also should be grateful to him because he possibly is an unsung hero in this campus. Ladies and gentlemen, I once again thank Anirban and Sucheta for the wonderful work they are doing in the area of research, and I sincerely hope middle or end May, there will be only one research center which will look after all research activities, and that building will be, I told Anirban that it would be about 1,25,000 square feet, and both of you should work together. So the research is something you have to share between yourself, and I sincerely hope before I end my professional life, I will see the privilege of looking at that large research center. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. We are now at the end of this inaugural function, and to give a perfect end to this event, and the right person to do this job is none other than the backbone of this grand event, the driving force, our also ever energetic Dr. Sucheta Kumarian, Professor, Principal Scientific Officer, Central Research Laboratory, and the PI of Indo-Japan MEX project. May I now request ma'am to deliver the words of gratitude.
Good morning to all. Honorable Chancellor, Sir, Presiding Officer of the day, respected Chief Guests, dignitaries on the dais and off the dais. It is my privilege to deliver the vote of thanks for the inaugural session of Indo-Japan Laboratory at Central Research Lab, Kshema. It gives me immense pleasure to express my sincere gratitude to our Honorable Chancellor, Sri N. Vinay Hegde sir, for presiding the inaugural function. Words are not enough to thank you, and I am grateful for your constant guidance, support and encouragement, and for your gracious presence, sir. Here I am blessed. Last 38 years I am associated with sir, and first time I am standing in front of sir and telling thanks. But every day I thank him in my own way. But I am very grateful, sir. We had the opportunity to thank you in front of all. We are immensely thankful to our Dr. Harish Kumar Madhyastha sir, who since last 10 years he helping us to develop the research center, and whatever the small research activities we do, he appreciates, and he made us to connect in a large way, and he is helping every day. He is discussing about the project outcome and encouraging all the junior scientists. It's a great pleasure, and we are really heartfelt thank you, sir. And today's guest, our guest Kuroda Sensei sir, and Taka Sensei sir and Muroka Sensei. We are very blessed your presence in our campus, and you are accepted our felicitation, and you really guided us throughout our research projects. We are very grateful on behalf of NITTE University as well as our KSEC Medical College and as well as all our research team, sir. Thank you very much, sir. I would like to express my deep gratitude to our Pro-Chancellor, Professor Dr. Shantaram Shetty, sir. Sir, you are really inspired us throughout our medical last 22 years as a dean, as a vice chancellor and pro-chancellor. For everything, whatever we go to him, he is very supportive. We are really grateful to you, sir, for all your concern. Thank you, sir. I am very grateful to our Dr. Satish Kumar Bandari, our Vice Chancellor, sir. For anything we call, he is very approachable, and he is to guide us for everything throughout our, as a Dean and Vice Chancellor. We are very grateful to sir for your kind support throughout in our life. And our Pro-Vice Chancellor, Professor Mudita, sir, also used to help us for all these days, whatever we discuss about the research. And coming to our Director of Finance, Dr. Rajendra sir. Sir, whatever something I could not get through proper channel, I hide and go to sir and request him, and he is to help me to get the project, whatever the fund I need. I am really blessed your presence, sir. I extend my sincere thanks to our respected Dean Kshema, Professor Dr. P.S. Prakash sir, Vice Dean, Dr. Amit Mirajkar sir, and our Jayaprakash Shetty sir. Really we are very grateful to your all support, sir. And our Director Dr. Praveen Kumar Shetty is also, and our Nursing Principal, our Chairman of SSP Forum. She is encouraging every day, whatever I call, she helps us, and we are very grateful to you, madam. And Harish Kumar sir, from all the way from NITTE, he came here with family. We are very grateful to your presence, sir. I would like to thank all the head of the institutions and staff and my dear student Grace, who helped us to grace this occasion, and I'll thank you very much. And today there are two speakers to just give a geoinformation technology in public health. That is Dr. H. Gangadhar Bhatt is a professor from Mangalore University, and Dr. B. Naveen Chandra Shetty, he is from the NITK campus, from the incubation center. Both are enlightening us now in half an hour about the geoinformation technology in health, in public health. We are very grateful to your presence, sir. I extend my thanks to the people who worked behind the scene to make this event happen, mainly our maintenance, Sir S.K. Pai, Arjun, Kishore, Hemant, all of them, we every day morning to evening we used to call them and ask their support to development of the lab. We are really grateful to you all. And finally, I have to thank our investigator. Here I was really have to mention all the doctors of Kshema who are working in the clinic. They are really supporting all the research work. I am very grateful throughout my journey. We had so many projects, BRNS project, ICMR project, VGST project, and we had 2 NH projects. And this is the Indo-Japan. We had diaper projects, in-mass collaboration. For all that we needed all doctor support in and out. I am really grateful each and everyone. They are very kind, very supportive, very approachable. And today we have Sipra Madam, Prashant, and our technical, our research center, Dr. Shilpa, and all our staff. They are really helping to continue the research and projects. I am very grateful to you all, Madam. And our CRL, my colleagues, Dr. Prashant Shetty, Veena Madam, Mohan Kumar, Prakash Patil, Tamiz, Vishak, Sharmila, Reshma, Prajna, Sudevi, all of them are struggled to happen this event. And my little research students, all of them, day and night, they are helping without hesitating, whole 8 to 8 days to work for the establishment of the lab and for this event to happen. I am grateful to each and everyone who helped. Then finally, press and media and our video coverage from Suddhi, from Putturu, and all our caterers, everybody is struggled to happen this event successfully. I am very grateful to each one of them. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, ma'am. Before closing the inaugural function, I request all of you to kindly rise for the national anthem.
जन गण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल गंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्चल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Thank you all for making this inaugural ceremony a success. With this, we conclude our inaugural ceremony. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll now disperse for a tea break and assemble back by 11:30. We have lined up some interesting guest lectures. There is a talk by Dr. Shipra Sonuskare, Environmental Toxins and Pregnancy, and a talk by Dr. H. Gangadhara Bhatt and Dr. B. Naveen Chandra on applications of geoinformation technology in public health.
माझी पेनड्राईव्ह काढून दिला पहिले मला पेस्ट करून दे ना मला पेस्ट करून देत पाहिजे ते कुठे माझी पेस्ट केली होती पण नाही झाली
आली असेल दुसरीकडे कुठेतरी जाऊन चल झालं ना आता ओपन होतीये ना
ओपन तर होता
हां ठीक आहे तिकडे ते करतील ते
ठीक आहे बंद करून बंद का नाही
गॅस कमेंट
माऊस
करतील ते
पेनड्राईव्ह काढायची
हे आहे का तुझं हेच आहे का पण हे हालतच नाही ಅಲ್ಲ ಇಲ್ಲ ಡೂಪ್ಲಿಕೇಟ್ ಹಾಂ ಓಕೆ ಫುಲ್ ಸ್ಕ್ರೀನ್ ಇಲ್ಲ ಸರ್ ಹಾಂ ಈಗ ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಅದು ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ ಅದು ಯಾವ ಟಾಪ್ ಉಂಟು ಫಸ್ಟ್ ಅದು ಅವರೇ ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ ಅಥವಾ ಗೊತ್ತಿಲ್ಲ ಅದು ಜಸ್ಟ್ ಅದು ವರ್ಕ್ ಆಗ್ತಾ ಉಂಟು ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಮಿನಿಮೈಸ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಇಟ್ಟಿದ್ದೇನೆ ಥ್ಯಾಂಕ್ಸ್ Good morning, good morning everybody.
Morning, good morning. ನೀವು ಮೀಟ್ ಆಗಿದ್ದೀರ ಅವ್ರ ಮೊದಲು ಹರಿಕೃಷ್ಣ
Oh, yeah.
medical school.
Very good school. Yeah.
So that this lab has been completed. This is exactly about we got here genetics lab also. Genetics lab.
Very good.
Sir, he is not. Please, please.
Thank you.
Nothing like the lab. This they want this setup. Everything. ಅದು ಆನೆ ನಿಂಚು. ಜಾಗ ಕಡಿಮೆ ಅಂತ ಕಾಣುತ್ತೆ.
In the area of South Kerala, Udupi and Kasaragod, we found lead is high in water, arsenic is very high, chromium, cadmium, because that Geo people, they said, this is because of heavy buildings are coming up, sir. These asbestosis and all that contaminates the whole water.
Deceleration block is
Gas chromatography is also.
Gas chromatography. Chromatography technique to know only is a big task. It's a very big task. Any chromatography, HPLC, all these, lot of troubleshooting.
You can just walk through it.
Good morning, good morning, good morning everybody. Good morning, good morning. ನೀವು ಮೀಟ್ ಆಗಿದ್ದೀರ ಅವರ ಮೊದಲು ಹರಿಕೃಷ್ಣ Oh, yeah, medical school. Very good school, yeah. So that this lab is we got here genetics lab also. Genetics lab. Very good.
Sir, he is not. Please, please.
Sir, conference. Sir, munde hodu. Okay. Ayyo, yum. Thank you.
They want this setup.
In the area of South Kerala, Udupi and Kasaragod, we found lead is high in the water, arsenic is very high, chromium, cadmium, because that geo people, they said, this is because of heavy buildings are coming up, so this asbestos, this and all that contaminates the whole water. Previously.
Gas chromatography.
Gas chromatography technique to know only is a big task. It's a very big task. Any chromatography, HPLC, all these, lot of troubleshooting.
You can just walk through it.
morning, everybody.
Morning, good morning. ನೀವು ಮೀಟ್ ಆಗಿದ್ರ ಅವ್ರ ಮೊದಲು ಹರಿಕೃಷ್ಣ They want this setup. Everything.
In the area of South Kendra, Udupi and Kasaragod, we found like this high in water.
Completed her MBBS from JIPMET Pondicherry and her graduation from Chandigarh, both Apex Central Government Institutes. She has also been conferred the fellowship of the Indian College of OBG as well as membership of the National Academy of Medical Sciences, New Delhi. She has obtained the prestigious membership of the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, London, and is a diplomate of the National Board of Examination. She has a keen interest in high-risk pregnancies, minimally invasive surgeries, and has obtained fellowships in minimally invasive advanced gynecological surgery as well as in gynecological oncology from Charles University, Czech Republic. She is currently doing her fellowship in robotic surgeries in gynecological cancers. Despite being a busy clinician, dynamic surgeon, and a very good teacher, she manages time for her research and is trained in conducting research and clinical trials. Over to you, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. So welcome back after the tea break. So without wasting any time, we'll start with the topic. So I'm an obstetrician and a gynecologist, so I'll be talking on the environmental toxins in pregnancy. And to start with, basically we are all surrounded by a lot of toxins, So chemicals are there in almost everything, from the dishes we eat on, from the pet care products to the air we breathe. While the pregnant patients can and should avoid the certain toxins, such as chemicals and bacteria in meat, they can avoid all this, bacteria and unpasteurized milk, but still impossible to avoid every potential exposure to the toxins for the pregnant women. So this is the picture, the real picture of the last year. This is Chhat Puja, which happens usually in September and October, in the month of September, October, in the northern part of the India, mainly in the Bengal and the Rajasthan and the Jharkhand and the Bihar side. So this puja is basically done to, for the good health of the family members and the people around. And this is where the worshippers, who are the devotees, they actually bathe in Ganges and then they offer their offerings. And this is actually, it looks like a cloud, but this is actually this is the Yamuna river with all toxic froth coming out of the river water. And this man is bathing in the Ganges and is worshipping. So this is the level of pollution, and this is New Delhi. So this Yamuna river of New Delhi with the toxic froth above the Ganges. So this is New Delhi. So we come to Mangalore. So Mangalore also is not free from because of all the pollution, because of our hydropower projects and lot of industrialization. So now how do you know that how much we are affected with these environmental toxins? So AIIMS New Delhi conducted a study, and they found that they studied the people who do not have any serious, who do have a serious illness, but they do not have a known cause for the serious illness. Like they studied the people who have lung cancers, but they do not smoke. They studied people who have liver cirrhosis, but they do not consume alcohol. And they found the levels of environmental toxins in those people who do not have a known cause for their illnesses have very high levels of environmental toxins. So that's why we need to be cautious about the environmental toxins around us. And that's my whole idea of this talk is to sensitize people to start with. I will not go into the details of the mechanisms, how they affect us in pregnancy, but I just want to sensitize the whole crowd that we are surrounded by toxins and we need to take care of that. So embryo, as we know, is a very susceptible age, and because there's a lot of development going on, the neural development happening in the embryo and the fetus, and they're very vulnerable, critical, and they're sensitive to every changes which happens in their environment. And any substandard fetal conditions of varying degrees can produce any developmental delay. It could be a mental or it could be a physical developmental delay in the embryo when the babies are born. So now we do have a lot of literature. There's numerous literature talking about the toxicity of these toxins in these babies. So in US, almost 100% of the women who are pregnant, they do have their chemicals in their body, which are even banned. So most of the chemicals which have been seen in their body, as per the literature, they are present almost all the pregnant women, and some of the chemicals are even banned to be used by any general public. And study in AIIMS Delhi also said the same thing. And they have detected many chemicals like, with all difficult names, all these polychlorinated biphenyls, organochlorine pesticides, all these chemicals have been detected in the pregnant women, which are actually toxic and harmful to the developing fetus. And even BPA, which is quite commonly talked of. Now, what are the windows? When are the times when the child can get affected because of these toxins? It can start as early as the blastocyst stage. So this is the state which happens just 5 to 6 days after the event of fertilization. That means the pregnant lady has not even missed her period, and she doesn't even know that she's pregnant, but then it is called as periconceptional period, and if she's exposed to toxins at this particular period, the baby can have impact because of those environmental toxins. So it can happen even when the mother is pregnant in advanced pregnancy, in the fetal stage, or when the babies are born in infant stage, and child is even affected when the child is adolescent. So we have the long-term effects and as well as the immediate effects of these toxins to the children. Now, what can be the effects on the fetus? So effect on the fetus can vary from structural abnormalities as called as teratogenicity, or they can have altered growth like low birth weight babies or IUGR babies, or they can have functional deficiencies when they are born, and they can have tumors or cancers when they are born, and it can even lead to death of the fetus or fetal loss. So all this lead, tobacco smoke, DDT, they all have high risk of abortion, low birth weight, as well as preterm birth. So even the autism has been connected to the environmental toxins. So it's said that autism has been correlated with certain geographical conditions, and it is said that it works with an inherent at-risk genotype, so it acts as a complementary element to the genotype which is at risk of developing autism, and this can actually add on to the cause as an autism, the environmental toxins. And even alcohol, tobacco, smoke, they are well known teratogens which can affect the pregnancy in different ways. So I'll not talk about alcohol, tobacco. I'll just come to some heavy metals like mercury. So elemental mercury or methyl mercury is known to be a toxin, heavy metal. And it's mainly a contaminant of seafood. How does it get into the sea is with all our industrialization, all our minings and things like that. And it gets in the seafood, and then the freshwater, it's a contaminator of seafood as well as the freshwater fish. And it is known to have adverse nervous system effects, especially during the brain development. So eating fish is the main source of mercury exposure in the humans, and especially the large size fishes. We all know about the 1950s, what happened in Minamata Bay. The pictures are there on the internet, but the pictures are really traumatizing and they're really gross, so I didn't put those pictures here. But everybody knows the children in this women who had consumed the fish during that particular time were born with a lot of malformations and development delay, and they are still suffering with that. And they have high risk of miscarriage. So what can be the effects of mercury toxicity? Physical and intellectual disabilities, because it actually harms the nervous system as well. So FDA has advised the pregnant women should not eat swordfish, shark, king mackerel, and tilefish, and limit the consumption of tuna to less than 6 ounces or less a week. So these are the FDA recommended fish to be eaten. So FDA has said these are the best choices of fish we should be eating. So luckily we fall in an area where we eat the sardines, we eat the fish which are actually recommended by FDA. And there are good choices where we should limit the serving to a week serving, and then the choices of the fish to avoid because they have high mercury levels are what I just mentioned before. So FDA has clearly recommended which fish are to be eaten and which are to be avoided for the pregnant women. So what is the safe level of mercury for pregnancy? So they have a lot of dispute. There is no dispute that the methyl mercury is injurious to the baby's brain development. So what can be disputed is what is the safe level of mercury. But now the literature, or that even WHO says that we do not get into the safe level of mercury, but any level of mercury is actually hazardous for the pregnant lady. So coming to the lead, so lead exposure in pregnancy can cause miscarriage, low birth weight, neurological delays in the babies, anemia, and encephalopathy. And toxicity because it crosses the placental barrier. And even the low exposure to the lead produces intellectual and behavioral effects in the children. So toxicity can harm the kidneys and the liver and the neurological damage and even the anemia with effects in the blood. So it occurs through various exposure. So it can have inhalation. We can inhale the lead through certain chemicals. It can happen even in the crockeries which we eat in, the dishes which we eat in. We can have food which is already polluted with lead toxicity. So coming to pesticides. So there are studies which show that pesticides, particularly DEET and vinclozine, it is found in infants' cord blood. That means the mother is already exposed to these pesticides. So exposure to pesticides can occur in a very informal way while walking away a contaminated area, agricultural area which is already contaminated with pesticide. We can get toxicity or exposure to these pesticides. So with this, even that amount of pesticide toxicity is significant, has a significant impact in the pregnant women. So even organophosphate pesticides, it is known to have cognitive and behavioral deficits seen in the toddlers and even in the neonates. So what does literature say about the organophosphate pesticide exposure? Now, there are a lot of review has been done and systematic review has been done. It actually tells us that even the prenatal, also the postnatal, prenatal exposure to organophosphate pesticide can also contribute to developmental and the behavioral deficits in pregnant women. So arsenic. So arsenic also, there's a lot of toxicity because of arsenic, because of the food we consume might be polluted with arsenic. Even the milk we drink might have arsenic in it. So there are ways of getting arsenic getting into our system. So it can affect the liver, kidney, brain, or other systems, including anemia. And there are ways to reduce the toxicity. And these are some of the arseniconosis, which are basically arsenic deposits in our system. And this is the lab findings showing anemia. Even this is also seen with lead toxicity. There are other pollutants which I will not talk in detail, benzene, cyanide, radiation, CO2, and the natural gas wells, which can affect the pregnant women. This toxic material from the environment, they do not just act directly on our systems in the liver and the kidney, but they also act as something called as endocrine disrupting chemicals. What basically they do is, they act at the receptor level of these hormones. And when they act at the receptor levels of these hormones, they actually change the hormone concentration within our system, and they lead to incorrect hormonal responses in our body. So that's why they're called as endocrine disrupting chemicals. And they disrupt the normal enzyme functioning also. So this is how they act. So these are the sources from where we get these toxins. These are the toxins present in those sources. And this is how they deal with all the metabolic activities, right, from the diabetes, the obesity, the insulin resistance, the liver cholesterol levels. So every system of the body gets affected because of these toxins, which actually act as EDC, or endocrine disrupting chemicals. So where does the placenta of the pregnant patient, how does it affect the pregnant ladies? What is the role of the placenta? We all know placenta is a membrane, a barrier between the mother and the fetus, but it is a semi-permeable membrane. We want it to be semi-permeable. We want it to be an imperfect barrier because we want the nutrients to get from the mother to the baby. So because we need substances for the baby. So that's why it's an imperfect barrier. And at the same time, fetus also is has an immature metabolism. It is not like adult, and it is not able to detoxify the substances which the mother gives to the baby in the form of toxins. And CO2, lead, ethanol, they have very high likelihood of placental transfer. So these are the substances which actually, concentration of lead is supposed to be more in the baby than the mother. So how do we get exposed to these toxins? So we can have the cans, we can have the toothpaste, we can have the mosquito repellents, we can have this arsenic in our milk bottles, we can have the lead in the paints, we can have the mercury in the batteries, the DDT with food, and everything, the foam here containing the chemicals here, and the petrol and ethanol, and everything else surrounding us actually has some way or the other toxins in them. So organophosphaticides, they are found in the food which have the residents staying nearby the agricultural land where this pesticide is used. The foods will be having the toxin on them. And house dust also has a lot of toxin. Polybrominated diphenyl ether is commonly found in the house dust, where the old foam furniture which carries this toxin. Other than the air pollution, the lead is also found in the house dust. It's in the older homes where the lead was used as a paint, and also it is found in garden areas and other things. Mercury, as we said, is found in the fish, and PCB or polychlorine biphenyls is found in some food, especially the fish, the bottom feeders. Mercury, this is in the top of the food chain. The big fish contains mercury, and this is the bottom feeders. The milk, the meat, dairy product will have this toxin in them. Now there's something called PFAS also, polyfluoroalkyl substances, and that is also present within cooking pans, the non-stick cooking pans which are used for cooking. So that will have this toxin when we start cooking in these pans. The raincoats we wear, the rain repellent, the waterproof clothes we wear, they all have this material, and even can be there in the water, or you can inhale in the this thing. So as an individual, we all have responsibilities. As a health professional, we all have responsibilities. So as an individual, you should avoid products with this particular toxin. As a health professional, you should advise people not to use or how to avoid this. And as a business, we should try to phase out the use of this. And as a policymakers, we should try to ban this. Now, what are the effects seen in pregnancy? So almost all the toxins, I've just mentioned few of them, BPA and other things, but they all work at the even semen level, they work at the ovulation level, they work at the menstruation level, so they work at the hormonal levels as well. So they are known to reduce the semen quality, then semen quantity, they cause infertility, they can cause early miscarriages, and they also lead to preterm birth, the intrauterine growth restriction, the congenital malformations of the fetus, the structural anomalies, the neurodevelopmental impaired, the intellectual as well as the physical development of the babies are impaired because of all these toxins present in our environment. And also, when the child is born, they can have attention disorder problems, they have aggression, hyperactivity, and executive functioning skills are hampered because of that. And the mother also has high risk for breast cancers, and they have increased childhood cancer and susceptibility to testicular cancer with the pesticides. So these are the effects it causes in pregnancy as well as with children. Now, the ACOG, the American College of Obstetricians and Gynecology, have clearly mentioned that these are the medications, these are the chemicals which are to be avoided in the pregnant women. And they're commonly used in our day-to-day activities and the day-to-day life. So they have placed certain recommendations. Now, what are those recommendations? as a clinician, as an obstetrician, we should be knowledgeable about this toxic environmental agents. Normally, we don't even ask the patients about where our living conditions are, where does she live in, does she have pets at home. So this is not a part of her routine history. But ACOG says that we have to be sensitive to this kind of environment, patients coming from these places, and we should be including that in our health risk assessment also, targeting the exposure reduction and also provide them the clinical counseling. So in our history, we need to include questions about the environmental exposure in the patient whenever she comes for a pregnancy visit and whenever she comes for the prenatal care. Our history should include the assessment for exposure for the workplace, the home, or the recreational activities. And we need to integrate our environmental health sensitization in our postgraduate training in the obstetric gynecology. And we have to advocate for policies, demand for policies to reduce the harmful exposures and protect the health of the pregnant women and their children. This is the International Federation of Gynecological Obstetrics, who has also placed its recommendations to avoid the exposure of toxins in the pregnant women. So what does it say? It says the policies should be made by the policymakers to prevent the exposure of the pregnant women to the environmental toxins. We need to work to ensure a healthy food system for all of us, all the pregnant women. We have to make the environmental health part of the healthcare. So it should be a part of the routine healthcare and not a special category. So it should be incorporated in our routine healthcare, the prevention of environmental toxicity. And it is a global phenomenon. So every woman has a right, every pregnant woman has a right to reduce her exposure from the environmental toxicity. So what are the tips given by the FIGO? It says avoid eating, drinking, or storing food in plastics because all those chemicals, especially the BPA I mentioned, is used in the plastic material. Then tip number 2, so do not microwave anything in the plastic containers. Tip number 3, they are all standard, recommended, evidence-based guidelines placed by the International Federation of Obstetrics and Gynecology. Cook with the cast iron or the stainless steel to avoid some chemicals in the non-stick pans which are harmful to the pregnant women. Avoid eating fish with high mercury as mentioned in the FDA, mentioned by FDA in the recommendations, or PCBs with like shark and swordfish. Normally we do not eat in this part of the country. And eat fresh organic foods to avoid the pesticides. Limit the cosmetics. The lipstick have very high level of lead because to give it a luster and gloss in it. So avoid cosmetics which use phthalates and lead. Avoid dry cleaning or stain treating clothes because they also contain high levels of this lead and other chemicals. Use a wet mop because I said house dust contains lead and other toxic materials. So use a wet mop rather than dusting when cleaning to avoid the toxic dust. Avoid consumer products with flame retardants like a sofa or a sofa with a foam. And also keep the toxic materials out of your home by removing the shoes before entering the house because the house dust or the dust contains lead and other toxic materials. So these are the recommendations by the International Federation of Gynecology and Obstetrics. So this is summing up of all the recommendations here, and this is where we get all those toxins from and how these toxins can affect, and then these are the recommendations to be followed for the pregnant women. So now, and we also need to be sensitive about the pregnant women who work in the laboratories regarding the exposure to the toxins. With this, I'll say just thank you and I'll end my talk. Thank you very much. This is basically to sensitize. Yes, ma'am. Tell me, ma'am. Yeah.
So when we take a look at the plant systems, they have the capacity of hyperaccumulation, particularly to arsenic and lead. I'm working on group of plants, Brassicaceae family, which includes cauliflower, broccoli, all these which we tell, mustard, which we tell it's healthy for a pregnant woman to eat. But these also have very high level of heavy metals. This could be explored. Thank you.
Yes, madam. But what about the pesticides on those plants, madam?
Pesticides
on
are
those
superficial,
okay,
and maybe nowadays you get these aids where you dip it with the ozone or you dip it with some solution. You can remove what is there on the surface.
Okay.
But what has gone into the system, it actively secretes it into the vacuole. And plants don't have a system to get it out of them. So it results in biological magnification.
In the plants, okay.
And even if there is, say, 1 ppm pollutant in the surrounding, the plant will stay there
Higher
for a
level.
long period of time. And you might get 10 ppm per milligram or gram of tissue that we eat. So nowadays I'm little scared to say eat leafy vegetables because vegetables also are not healthy anymore with the soil. Whatever is in the soil,
right,
it
ma'am.
absorbs and it magnifies and gives it back to us.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Actually, lead, arsenic, they are harmful in any dose and any amount. So where the plant's getting it from is from the soil and the water, isn't it, ma'am?
Yes.
Yeah, so we need to reduce the pollution in the soil and the water.
Yes.
From the
indiscriminate disposal of batteries.
Yes, ma'am.
So whenever we think about alternative sources of energy, we all think solar is an option, and but the solar results in lot more battery usage.
Okay.
And this indiscriminate disposal of
Batteries also.
we do not have proper system of disposable. And this gets into the soil and this gets into the water. I'm taking a class, I'm sorry.
No, ma'am. I also don't know how to answer madam's question to reduce the exposure even by eating vegetables and plants if are getting exposed to lead and the mercury and the arsenic. So ultimately the problem is with the soil and the water the plants are getting the irrigation from. So I think we need to reduce that kind of exposure in the soil itself. Okay. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You are doing something. As the chairman of Government of India and Environmental Authority,
Yes, sir.
for Mangalore, for example, a few years back, about 6 years back, they stopped all the developmental. Because in the paper it is reported like these things only. Lead, central nervous system is affected. Mercury is not at all there here. But people reported. And that was taken by the government. They stopped all the industries. Then we wanted the government doctors here, including Shema. We wanted the guidelines for cause-effect relationship. Because what they wanted us, source is there, pathway is there, a receptor is there, and some disease is reported. Now we wanted a guidelines because all these things, whatever you have reported, prenatal or postnatal or long term, because it is a combination of several things inside. So we wanted the government departments like public health, in all the hospitals, they refused to take up this work. And also the government of India till today has not given us, because still I am the member of a committee here, they have not specified how to pinpointedly say that lead alone has created this CNS problem. Because it's as a doctor you can answer this, because we wanted a guideline from the government so that we can take up here as a study, like what now they have taken up some water and relation. Of course, water here in India, lot of studies and things are there. My question is there a particular guideline anywhere? Because even NIH we reported, but they have not given. Because it's a very complicated system, the doctors are saying. So can you please comment on this?
So as far as we doctors are concerned, it will be very unethical to do a study saying that yes, this is the cause for this particular problem only. We can only find the association between a particular metal and a particular disorder. I cannot pinpoint and say yes, this is the cause. I can say this particular population high level of lead exposure, and that is why this particular population also has high level of abnormalities in the children or the pregnant women. That much we can do. Yes, but they do not have the Indian guidelines regarding the this particular level has to be given. But WHO very clearly says there is no safe level for the lead and mercury and arsenic in the pregnant women. We cannot say at this particular level is allowed for the pregnant women and above this should not be given to the pregnant. So any level of exposure is to be avoided in the pregnant women. So that is very clear cut by WHO, sir. So any level of, it's not that less than 10 micrograms per ml is allowed in pregnancy. No, that is not allowed in pregnancy. Because the level, some of the levels in fetus are much higher than levels in the mother. That means it is accumulated in the fetus. We don't want that. So even if the levels are lower in the mother, but the babies will have higher levels which are toxic for the baby, small baby. Yes, sir. We are doing collecting, sir.
Send it for analysis of the heavy metal,
yes,
or
sir,
any particular lead or mercury in this area.
We are already doing, sir. We are collecting.
We will do it and compare two places. It may be urban and rural.
Okay.
Rural area where they are totally unexposed to this type of
Sir,
food or
actually, rural
environment.
area also they say it's very close to agricultural land, so they have very high levels of pesticides in rural part of the country. That is also, we can look for some particular metals which we think are much more, arsenic is much more found in our part of the city, Mangalore city.
Yeah, it's very difficult. The number of sample size may not be very large because of cost factor. But let us start. Let us have a beginning. Because as you said, any amount of chemical toxic elements are not permissible.
Yes.
But unfortunately, in India, because you also might have traveled.
Yes, sir.
You might have gone to Europe, and what sort of environmental restrictions are there? In India, we don't have any restriction. Naturally, all these elements are producing lot of problems.
Yes,
so I think we should start. It will be the beginning. We'll develop.
Yes, sir, we can do that.
But what happens is, Professor Sriniketan, everybody wants industry without any restrictions.
Yes.
Without any restriction. They say, no, even I'm Areca nut. We growers want a positive report.
Yeah.
Everybody wants a positive report which is helpful to them. Everybody, industry is also same thing, agriculture is also the same thing. They say if you don't want pesticides, how to grow this
vegetables
thing? It's easy to say because we want to have self-sufficiency in food. So all these things started after using pesticides and chemicals. I am a farmer. Unless you spray, nothing grows. But what to do? That's the biggest challenge now. How to do it? Organic farming, yes, very, very ideal.
Yes.
But so we have to play the balance between these two, pleasing the farmer, pleasing the people, environmentalists and all that. But we have to have some studies. So no doubt that we have to have some studies. Let us have some awareness. Let us create awareness about the thing. So placental test, I think, can give some postgraduates.
Yes. No, so we are already collecting it. We are only doing it ourselves. We are already collecting, storing it also. Yeah, we are doing it already, sir. Project. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shipra. Next, we have a talk, it's a joint talk on applications of geoinformation technology in public health by Dr. H. Gangadhara Bhatt and Dr. B. Naveen Chandra. But before that, I would like to introduce our two eminent speakers. Dr. Hejamadi Gangadhara Bhatt, he is a professor who has served as chairman, Department of Marine Geology during the year 2018-2019 in Mangalore University. He is the coordinator for Geoinformatics, Department of Marine Geology. His areas of specialization include geology, geomorphology, remote sensing, GIS, and satellite oceanography. He has guided 10 PhD students successfully, and 8 students are working for their PhD. He has more than 60 research papers published in national and international journals. He has completed 4 research projects funded by the Indian Space Research Organization ISRO, Ministry of Environment and Forest, Naval Research Board, and Ministry of Earth Sciences. He was awarded the Indian National Science Academy Fellowship during the year 2002-03. He is a life member of Geological Society of India, Indian Society of Remote Sensing, and Indian Society of Geomatics. He has served as the chairman, Indian Society of Geomatics Mangalore chapter, and has visited International Institute for Aerospace and Remote Sensing, Netherlands during 2001. He has wrote a number of popular articles in Kannada newspaper on remote sensing and its applications. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon to everybody, distinguished doctors, doctorate holders, and my dear friends. So for the next 30-35 minutes, I will be speaking on geoinformatics and its applications. In fact, we are exploring the possibility how best this technology can be used in public health. In fact, I was the faculty in the Department of Marine Geology, Mangalore University. In fact, we are running 2 courses, Marine Geology and Geoinformatics. Basically, I am a geologist, so that I can speak on water-related issues, and my field of specialization is remote sensing. And when I say geoinformatics. It comprises of remote sensing, cartography, GPS, global positioning system, geographical information system, web designing and all. Maybe in the future we can explore how best this technology can be used in public health related issues. See, you must feel proud when India launched the satellite in the year 1988 on March 18th. We launched a remote sensing satellite called IRS-1A. People were asking why a country like India has made and sent up a satellite instead of growing more food or digging more wells. Perhaps you may be little surprised to know that the satellite technology and food are very much interrelated. For growing more food, you need more accurate data on soil, water, and the other related issues. So, we need this technology to the maximum extent. In fact, we are making use of this technology for various kinds of resources mapping. See, where we have plenty of surface water, where we have the groundwater. Groundwater cannot be detected directly through remote sensing. We can make use of the inferences based on the surface expressions. We can make use of that knowledge to find out the groundwater potential zones and all, and where the contaminated water is there. When we talk about the public health issues, see, most of the issues are related to natural resources or your environment. So, a picture is worth 1,000 words. That too, when we are considering an aerial photograph or satellite images, which are worth than thousands of photographs taken from the ground or on the ground. See, we can make use of this technology to the maximum extent in resources mapping. Not only natural resources mapping, we can monitor the dynamic changes. Of course, I have some images. See, this is your campus area, that Devlakatta and adjoining area. See, we have, see, I said a picture is worth 1,000 words. See, you have a lot of multi-storied buildings and built-up areas, metal roads, concrete roads. Why I am showing this imagery is, see, nowadays we are converting the land into some other, for some other purposes we are converting the land. That means land use, land cover has changed over a period of time. If you analyze the same area about 25 years back, there were not this much of buildings. When I came to do my research at Mangalore University in 1986, there were hardly few buildings from Tokkottu to Konaje. But now see, you have 4 medical colleges along this road. And see, that means whenever you have more number of built-up areas are coming up, the concrete buildings, the metal roads, the asphalt roads, the impervious layers, groundwater is not recharged. Then temperature is increasing in an area. That means if you see, you must have heard about this urban heat island, and Mangalore city or Bangalore city already experienced that heat impact, and now lot of research is being carried out on urban heat island. That means if you compare the temperature of the urban area, especially center of the city with the suburban area, definitely there is a temperature difference of 2 to 3 degrees Celsius. Heat kills more people than any other weather event. So that I can monitor the heat, how much of temperature increased, that is called as urban heat island. That will have an impact on the environment. Now, most of the diseases are caused due to this temperature differences and all, that can be monitored. See, when India launched the first satellite, I said that was in the year 1988. Prior to that, America, NASA of USA launched a satellite called NASA launched a satellite called Landsat, which was capable of detecting 80-meter object of the Earth's surface. There is a tremendous technological advancement taking place in the field of space science. See, inaccessible areas can be monitored. When I talk about the water-related issues, diseases, or soil-related issues, see, I need not visit each and every part of the area. I can gather the required information through remotely sensed data. Sensing from a distance without any physical contact is called as remote sensing. Of course, that is one of the best tool for natural resources mapping. Earlier, they were using aerial photographs. Aircrafts were used in the World War time. Then the same technology got advanced and they launched sensors in the satellites. See, when you are reading or when you are seeing those words, you are employing remote sensing. Without any physical contact, you could be able to gather the required information. So in a similar way, satellites and aircrafts are carrying the sensors. Remotely sensed data about the Earth's surface features can be obtained through sensors mounted on platform. Our eye is acting as a sensor mounted on human body. In a similar way, there are sensors present in the satellites. They are capable of sensing the Earth's surface features, not only in the visible region. See, we can sense the surface features from 0.4 to 0.7 micrometer or 400 to 700 nanometer of the electromagnetic spectrum. Like our eyes, there are eyes present in the satellites. They are capable of detecting the signals at a different wavelength of the spectrum. You are aware of this ultraviolet rays, X-rays and all, they are used in medical imaging. But in remote sensing, especially when we talk about the natural resources mapping purposes, these UV rays and gamma rays are absorbed by the atmosphere. Atmosphere does not allow all the electromagnetic radiation to pass through it. The visible region, infrared region, thermal region of the electromagnetic spectrum, then microwave region of the spectrum can be used in remote sensing for detecting various Earth surface features. And when the first satellite was launched, that was capable of detecting 80-meter object of the Earth surface, and now some of the current satellites are capable of detecting even 30-centimeter object of the Earth surface. That means there is a tremendous technological advancement is taking place. We can make use of this technology to the maximum extent for detecting health-related issues, where the pollution is coming and where the land is degrading and all. Next slide. See, Landsat was launched during about 50 years back. That was during 1972. An increasing number of health studies have used remotely sensed data for monitoring, surveillance and risk mapping, particularly vector-borne diseases. Now, a lot of research papers are available. In fact, I was speaking to Professor Madhyastha and Professor Sucheta Madam the other day. See, there are number of papers available. Now we have to explore the possibility. Sir, is there? See, definitely this is one of the powerful technology which can be effectively used to collect the required information, and we can feed it into the models, then we can visualize the data. Database can be created for any particular area, or the environment is changing. See, one advantage of the satellite sensing is it is providing the multi-dated information. Not only today, if a particular satellite passes over Deralakatta area, over this K.S. Hegde Medical College, the same satellite will pass over this K.S. Hegde Medical College on the 18th day, 36th day, 54th day. That means you are getting the repeativity. That means time series data are available. Definitely that will play a significant role when we talk about the public health related issues and all. What was the condition then? What is the present scenario? See, these kind of things can be monitored. Next slide. Sorry. So these are some of the slides. I will skip some of the slides because of the time constraint, but at the end you can generate the maps. See, that is the end product here, whatever may be the data product by using. Okay, thanks. See, at the end we can generate maps which show areas where human populations live in environmental conditions susceptible to disease infestation. Just now I said about the land use, land cover. Over a period of time, the land use cover has changed, land use has changed. What will be its impact on the public health? See, health related issues that can be tackled. Just now I said we need not visit each and every part of the area. Next slide. See, this is the fundamental concept of remote sensing. So we have the solar energy. That energy is reaching the Earth's surface. It interacts with the Earth's surface features. Part of the light will be reflected, part is absorbed, and part is transmitted through the object. These three will be different for different Earth surface features. That permit us to distinguish different surface features on a remotely sensed data. See, what type of land form is there? There is a difference between a land form and land use, land cover. Then where I have the water resources, where mosquito breeding grounds are there, where the stagnant waters are there. See, that can be detected through satellite technology. So here, the energy is reaching the Earth's surface, it interacts with the Earth's surface features, and retransmitted energy will be recorded by a sensor of a satellite. So we have a Earth receiving station located at Hyderabad. So whenever the Indian satellites passes over the Indian subcontinent, they make use of the antennas and they receive the satellite signals, they process the satellite data and will be using for different applications. Next slide. See here, again spatial information, not only the spatial information, how much of area is covered with forest or how much area is covered with water body, what type of soil is there. Then temporal resolution means how often a particular satellite passes over that area. So using this technology, I can map the dynamic changes occurring in and around the area. So remote sensing and associated spatial modeling techniques hold particular potential for effective monitoring and forecasting of human and animal diseases, developing policies and implement interventions aimed at better controlling these diseases. So that is possible with this technology. Next slide. So I will skip some of the slides. Skip Maditu. See, this is the geospatial technology. Geospatial, again I said in the beginning, comprises of remote sensing, then geotagged information and all. We say a particular tree may be geotagged, means we have GPS satellites, global positioning system satellites. They are having an altitude of about 20,000 kilometers. They provide the required information at what latitude and at what longitude you are. Suppose your well is polluted, water is there, you can locate that well, what are the latitudes and longitudes, where the borewell is located, where the groundwater is contaminated. See, those geotagged information can be fed into the database, then you can apply the models, then you can visualize, and definitely you can come up with useful results. That is possible with this technology. Next slide. You can skip some of these slides. You can skip, we will go to. See, this is again a clear picture of your campus area. So you can see, the next slide. See, just I wish to say a few more things about this geoinformatics. Cartography is nothing but map making. See, maps are very much needed for any kind of resources mapping or public health related issues. They are self-explanatory with all legends. If you see just the map, it will provide the required information. So cartography is a branch of geoinformatics. Geodesy, so that is exactly related to the position and all shape of the earth. Then global navigational satellite system that are required to get the required information regarding coordinates of that particular area, geotagging and all purposes. Photogrammetry means you are deriving some quantitative information based on 3D aerial photographs or 3D satellite images. See, without visiting this particular Deralakatta area, I can measure the height of this hospital building with the help of 3D images. Even the height, if they are haphazard, maybe individual trees with so much of space and all, then I can measure the height of that tree with the help of 3D photographs or 3D images. That is coming under photogrammetry. Most of the base maps are available based on these techniques. We have Survey of India office located at Dehradun. In fact, they are generating these topographical maps. Then we have the remote sensing, just I am speaking on that, spatial analysis, web mapping and all. So these are the branches. Spatial analysis. See, that is related to space. For example, how much area K.S. Hegde campus is occupying. So that information I can gather through remotely sensed data. The secondary data, how many doctors are there, how many experts are there, what are their specializations, that I am collecting by coming over here. Then that are considered as attribute data or non-spatial data. Then when I link the spatial data with the non-spatial data, I will be getting the required information for this particular geographical area. That is what it is called as Geographical Information System. And my colleague, Dr. Naveen Chandra, will speak on that issue. GIS, that is Geographical Information System, and some of the softwares. See, in remote sensing again, the digital image processing, you must have heard about this digital image processing, that is having a link with the medical images. In fact, digital image processing started with the medical images. Earlier they were using this technology to enhance the image, to get more and more useful information from the images. Because normally when we talk about the satellite data, see, it is having number of noises because of the intervening atmosphere and all, scattering effect and all. That has to be enhanced. Once you enhance the image, you will be able to get the required information about the Earth's surface features. In a similar way, medical images must be enhanced. Again, we are making use of that image processing techniques, but there the software used is different. Next slide. See, this is again your Deralakatta area. Time series data needle. Next you can skip. You can skip some of the slides. I have some images later on. See, this is your 2004 satellite imagery. I said satellites are providing time series data. If a particular satellite passes over this area, you can expect the same satellite on the 18th day. But we do not have a single satellite. We have constellation of satellites, group of satellites. That means every day this area is being monitored by a satellite. There are hundreds of satellites orbiting over the globe. In fact, Indian satellites, there are 30, 40 satellites are orbiting over India. So these are the time series 2004. You carefully observe your Deralakatta, K.S. Hegde Hospital and adjoining area. How was it during 2004? These are time series data 2006, then 2012. See, number of built-up areas have come up. Land use, land cover has changed. That means I can monitor the dynamic changes occurring in any place using this multi-dated satellite data. Next slide. So this is 2019, 2022. See, now you have number of built-up areas. Vegetation cover is also there, but whether it is increased or decreased, that sort of studies can be carried out by using the analysis of multi-dated satellite data. Okay, you can skip, you can go to that, another 5-6 slides you can skip. All this you skip. See, where we can make use of these three: emergency services, service delivery, disease and risk factor mapping, time trends, then environmental health, natural disaster, education and research, medical care, then modeling. There are number of algorithms are available. You can make use of that and you can develop your own, or else you can make use of this existing models and you can come up with some useful results at the end. Next slide. Modeling and all, you can skip. There's number of, you can skip all these slides. Okay. So case studies of using satellite remotely sensed data and GIS geospatial techniques in environmental public health applications will be presented by Dr. Naveen Chandra. Next slide. You can skip the, skip some of these slides. See, these are the diseases, and for the identification of these diseases, they have used of different satellite sensors. There are a number of satellites available, American satellites, then France has also launched a series of satellites, India too launched a series of satellites. Next slide. Next. Okay, you skip all this. See, there is World Health Organization. In fact, they are also giving the satellite data, whichever country needs some of the satellite data related to public health issues, they are supplying that. Next slide. Next, you can skip some, skip all these slides. Go to the pictures, there are few pictures. See, this is remote sensing platforms. See, earlier we were using aircrafts. Even now also that technology is being used. And same piece of land is being photographed from two different angles. And in this process you are getting the three-dimensional view of the terrain, so that you can analyze those photographs and you can make the measurements, quantitative information, not only the qualitative information, the quantitative information, what is the thickness of that particular soil or how much water is there in a particular reservoir. See, volumetric analysis can be carried out with the help of these 3D images. Then of course we have the satellite remote sensing. They are having an altitude of about 700 to 900 kilometer. Then, next slide. See, this is remote sensing techniques. So we can make use of this quite effectively for public health and epidemiology, and which have until recently overwhelming taken up remotely sensed data products. So they have used this technology quite effectively. Next slide. Next, you can skip. Yeah, see, eye of the cyclone can be detected with the help of a remotely sensed data. Next. See, these are the electromagnetic spectrum. See, one can make use of these wavelengths, different wavelengths. In the beginning I said gamma rays and X-rays, they are being used in medical imaging, but they are not at all used in natural resources mapping purposes, because you have the intervening atmosphere. The energy has to pass through the atmosphere. Whenever the energy passes through the atmospheric particles absorb this radiation, and they will allow only the visible thermal and microwave portion of the spectrum to reach the Earth's surface. Next slide. See, this is again the electromagnetic spectrum starting from gamma rays up to radio waves. So, but in remote sensing we make use of this visible infrared, thermal and microwave portion of the spectrum. Next. See, this is how the remote sensing is being practiced. See, you have the sources of energy. So sun is the chief source for the electromagnetic radiation. It reaches the Earth's surface, it interacts with the Earth's surface features, then retransmitted energy will be recorded by an aircraft or spacecraft at different altitudes. Aircraft is normally taking the photograph from 10 to 15 kilometer or up to 30 kilometer. Then we have remote sensing satellites which are having an altitude of about 700 to 900 kilometer. They are very much useful for natural resources mapping. I can carry out the vegetation mapping, how much of forest area is there, where the evergreen forests are there, where the deciduous forests are there. Then coastal related aspects, where the polluted water is coming. Some of the industries are discharging the effluents to the nearby streams without any treatment. See, those things can be monitored. And see, you have the aircraft, then you have the spacecraft. Of course, there are two types of satellites, polar orbiting and geostationary satellites. Geostationary satellites are having an altitude of 36,000 kilometer. Indian national satellites are geostationary satellites. They are very much useful for telecommunicational purposes. You are getting 500, 600 channel TV programs, or you are communicating with your friends through mobile network. All these things are possible with communication satellites. They are Indian national satellites. They are also providing the required weather information. So finally the data is being acquired and that data is being processed by us. Then we are generating some useful information at the end, and that will be supplied to the users. For example, in the health related issues, we can generate number of maps, the land use, land cover map, what type of landform is there, where the stagnant water are there. So all this information can be collected through remotely sensed data. Next slide. See, this is how the aircraft is collecting the data. Same piece of land is being photographed from two different angles. You are getting the 3D view of the terrain. Next slide. See, this is how the energy interacts with the Earth's surface features. So part of the light reflects, part is absorbed and part is transmitted. These three will be different for different Earth surface features. So that is the basic principle we are following when a remotely sensed data is provided to us. Where the vegetation cover is there, where the barren ground is there, where the water bodies are there. Next slide. See, this is how the spectral reflectance curves for vegetation, soil and water. In fact, in public health issues, these are very important, the natural resources, vegetation, soil and water. See, we can plot the spectral reflectance curves for various cover types. This is, one is for vegetation, that solid line, then another for that dashed line is for soil, then one more is there at the bottom, that is for water. See, water absorbs all the electromagnetic radiation, it looks black. So then I can say this much area is covered with water by seeing the black color because it absorbs all the electromagnetic radiation. Whereas the vegetation, see, it reflects maximum in the visible region of the spectrum, of which vegetation reflects green for us because it reflects in the green region of the electromagnetic spectrum. But when a plant is subjected to some sort of stress, the chlorophyll production reduces. The result is it turns to yellowish. That yellowish means, see, I can easily say that is a diseased tree. If it is a healthy vegetation, then it must reflect in the green region maximum light. But what happens when I am using, I said in the beginning, in remote sensing, we are not only using the visible region, beyond the visible region, the sensors present in the satellites are capable of sensing beyond the visible region of the electromagnetic spectrum. We cannot sense in the non-visible region, but sensors present in the satellites, they can sense. See, that is why vegetation shows maximum reflectance in the near infrared region of the spectrum. That is why normally whenever you make use of the satellite data, vegetation is represented by red color, not green color, especially in a false color composite of a satellite imagery, because vegetation reflects maximum light in the near infrared region of the spectrum. That is why you can see a peak there. Then because of the water molecules present in the leaves, they absorb the electromagnetic radiation. Like that water bodies, how soil behaves. See, soil taxonomy can be studied. What type of soil is there? Where the moisture rich soils are there, where the black cotton soils are there, that can be detected based on the spectral signatures. Next slide. See, this is how the normalized differential vegetation index, you see the visible region and near infrared region normalized differential vegetation index, and see, one is showing lesser NDVI value because it is a diseased vegetation, whereas healthy vegetation shows higher NDVI values. Next slide. See, this is how to differentiate. Suppose you have to differentiate two types of vegetation, that is broad-leaved species and coniferous leaves. See, you have the multispectral concept. See, when I am seeing you, that is the visible region of the spectrum is used, but in case of satellites, whenever it passes over an area, it records the signals in the blue region, green region, red region, and near infrared region of the spectrum. That means you are getting 4 bands of data. Why you need this? This concept is called multispectral scanning. See, if you are not in a position to differentiate these two types of vegetation in the blue, green and red, see, you see coniferous trees are showing lesser reflectance in the near infrared, whereas deciduous trees are showing higher reflectance. See, now I will be able to differentiate these two types of vegetation. Maybe soil is responsible or water may be responsible, that may be a polluted water. See, this kind of analysis can be carried out by using remote sensing techniques. Next slide. See, there are hundreds of satellites orbiting over the globe. The orbit is crowded. Now there is a traffic jam in the space. See, you see, there are hundreds. America is launching a satellite. Every day they are launching the satellites. Even public, private companies are launching the satellites. The orbit is crowded. Maybe my friends are here from Japan. Even Japan also launched a series of satellites. Japanese satellites are there, American satellites are there, European Space Agency satellites are there, Indian remote sensing satellites are there. There is no traffic jam. There is a traffic jam. That is why an international commission has been set up and they are allotting the slots where to launch the satellite and all. This is the world scenario. Coming to Indian scenario, next slide. See, we too have launched a series of satellites starting from IRS-1A, and the latest satellite is Cartosat, which is capable of detecting 30 centimeter object of the Earth's surface. When we are in a position to identify 30 centimeter object of the Earth's surface, definitely the land related issues, health related issues can be identified using this satellite technology. Next slide. Polar orbiting and geostationary satellites are there. Next slide. See, the two basic satellite orbits, one is polar orbiting, their altitude is around 700 to 900 kilometer. They are low Earth orbiting satellites, whereas geostationary satellites, INSAT series of satellites are having an altitude of 36,000 kilometer. They are useful for communicational purposes. They are not at all useful for natural resources mapping. See, covers different areas, each orbit as Earth rotates, provides detailed images, can produce time series data. That means at regular intervals you are getting the output that can be used for monitoring purposes. Next slide. See, this is how the satellite orbits. The north to south orbit is there. They are all polar orbiting satellites. Then the right one is the geostationary satellite having an altitude of 36,000 kilometers. Next slide. See how this satellite collects the data. See, it requires about 98 minutes to complete one full cycle of the Earth. Normally the satellite's orbit is from north to south. By the time the satellite completes one full cycle of the Earth is also rotating from west to east. That is why we are feeling the sun is moving from east to west. So the satellite requires about 98 minutes to complete one full cycle. By the time the Earth is also rotated from west to east. You will be seeing the next slide. See, there will be, next slide. See, there will be a large gap between successive orbits on a given day. However, with each new day, the satellite orbit progresses westwards, and which will be overlapping the orbit patterns of the previous day. That means if a particular satellite passes over Karnataka coast around 10:30 today, after 98 minutes, the orbit will be at a gap of 2,100 kilometers from Mangalore. So like that, on that particular day, you will have 14 orbits, but second day's first orbit will be adjoining to Mangalore. So like that, in a span, again second day you have 14 orbits, third day 14 orbits. In a span of 16 to 18 days, the entire world will be covered, and again the satellite will be over Mangalore coast on the 19th day or 20th day, depending upon its path width. So that if you divide 365 by 18 or 20, that many times a same satellite will pass over your area. So why you need this multi-dated images? That is called as multi-dated. The advantage of satellite remote sensing is you are getting multispectral plus multi-dated images, so that you can monitor the dynamic changes. What was the condition? What was the land use, land cover around this area about 20 years back, 10 years back, 5 years back, about a year back? Now some of the new buildings are coming up. Definitely you can monitor such kind of dynamic changes using this time series data. Next slide. See, this is when we talk about these health related issues. Spatial, spectral, temporal and radiometric resolutions are very important because we are making use of the satellite data related to health issues. So spatial, the minimum area of the ground which can be resolved by a sensor is called as its spatial resolution. How much area the satellite can be detected. So that varies from sensor to sensor. I said just now some satellites are capable of detecting even 30 centimeter object. Then spectral, at what wavelength of the spectrum the data is being recorded. Then temporal resolution, the repeativity, so that we can monitor the dynamic changes. Then radiometric resolution, that is sensitivity of that particular sensor. See, all these you can make use of the spatial, spectral. Whenever you are ordering for a satellite data for a particular application, definitely you have to specify all these details so that whatever the map you are generating at the end will be quite useful. Next slide. We will provide more information. So normally the satellite images are available in the digital mode. The analog values will be converted into digital numbers. When I say the digital number is 0, that means it is a darkest object. It could be a water body. If it is having a reflectance of 255, normally 8 bits of data is being used in remote sensing. 2 to the power 8, 2 into 2, if you multiply, you are getting 0 to 255 quantization level. That means 255 means it is the brightest object. It may be a sandy area, it may be a desert. See, in between you have different reflectance values. They are reflecting the Earth surface features. Next slide. Next slide. See, these are the digital numbers. Next slide. You can see these are the satellite images. See, one is having a swath width of 117 kilometer and 20 meter, that is Spot 5 satellite. The right side imagery is the IKONOS American satellite. You must have seen the Google images. They are providing enormous information. See that the same area, one of the Olympic venue you can see on the right side image, there the information is very clear, the built up areas, even the vehicle movement on the road you can see, because that is having a swath width of 13 kilometer and spatial resolution of 4 meter. Once the resolution improves, you will be getting more and more useful information about the earth surface features. Next slide. See, these are some of the, see wherever that red color is there, they are all vegetated areas, because I said the satellites, you know, the 5 nimisha, you will be able to get the required information using false color composite of a satellite imagery. See even the built up areas. Next slide. See the resolution, spectral, spatial, temporal and radiometric resolution, they are very important. With that I can identify various surface features. Next slide. See, these are some of the known satellites, NOVA, AVHRR, which is providing the weather information. See, this information can pass on to the fishermen, where the potential fishing zones are there. Based on the ocean color and sea surface temperature, once you integrate these two, you will be able to generate a potential fishing zone map, and you can direct the fishermen where to go for fish catching and all. Goes then moderate imaging spectroradiometer, which provides the temperature information. See, same satellite, Landsat, which are having sensors which functions in the visible region. With that you can carry out the land use land cover map, and using thermal band you can record the temperature differences. See, then you can correlate when there is a change in the land use land cover, there is a significant change in the temperature also. That can be monitored. Then spot, Iconos, QuickBird. See, 60 centimeter resolution images are available with the QuickBird satellite. Next slide. See the left side imagery and right side imagery. The same area, that is Cleveland, Ohio, USA. Now tell me which imagery provides more information, whether the right side imagery or left side imagery. Regarding vegetation, see, vegetation is represented by red color on the left side imagery, whereas on the right side imagery, vegetation is represented by green color. Normally vegetation reflects in the green, but here in the electromagnetic spectrum, the satellites are capable of sensing in the near infrared region also. In the near infrared region, they reflect about 50 to 60% of the light. That is why normally on a color composite, on the satellite imagery, vegetation is represented by red color. That means definitely the left side images provide more information regarding vegetation. Next slide. See, by using different spectral bands, I can combine the color composites. See, if you combine 1, 2, 3, you are at the top you are seeing the river and all. That is there the vegetation is represented by green color. But if you combine 2, 3, 4, you are getting the false color composite. Again, false color composite provides more information than the true color imagery. See, all these images, when you properly analyze, you are getting more and more useful information related to health issues. The environmental issues can be tackled in a better way by using this modern tool of remote sensing, and when it is integrated with the GPS and GIS, see, you are getting more and more information. This is how it looks panchromatic, that is single band black and white imagery. The same area with the multispectral band, you can see the vegetation and all clearly. See, this is how the digital image data formats, they are available in different formats. Then there is a special software package is required for processing the data. In fact, Dr. Naveen Chandra will speak on that IGIS software. It supports both image processing and GIS related work. Your ordinary software will not permit you to analyze the satellite images. A special software package is required. So with that you can do lot of analysis. Then you can generate a very useful information system pertaining to health related issues. That is possible because it will make your job easier. Inaccessible areas can be covered and all. There are number of applications. Next slide. I will take just another 5 minutes. So remote sensing, why we have to go for, see, synoptic coverage. That means that is Himalayan terrain. You will be able to see where the Himalayas are, that is Manasa Sarovara area. See why water bodies looks black. It absorbs all the electromagnetic radiation. There is no reflectance at all. So that is why it looks black. Then you have different types of glacier coverage, forest cover. See, all this you can differentiate. A bird's eye view will be provided by the satellites from that height. It provides the synoptic view or bird's eye view. Then repeativity, the same satellite can, the same satellite can pass over an area number of times. Inaccessible area, Western Ghats or Himalayan terrain, information in spatial domain, the aerial extent and all, what is the aerial extent of a particular forest or a diseased area, that all this information, Landsat, false color composite, next slide, just 2-3 slides are there. This is how we can generate the maps. See, here again you can see the features very clearly, the paddy fields, the adjoining area. See, this type of information you need when we talk about health related issues. Definitely where the barren lands are there, where the healthy vegetation is there, where the water is moving, where the polluted water, all this. Next slide. See, this is the last slide. If there are any specific questions, I will be able to answer 1 or 2 questions. Okay. Finally, I would like to thank the organizers, especially Sucheta Madam and Professor Madhyastha, for giving me an opportunity to share some of my thoughts. But definitely this is one of the powerful technology which can be effectively used in public health related issues. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Gangadhar Bhatt. Now we have B. Naveen Chandra, who will be giving further insights into the applications of geoinformation technology in public health. Dr. B. Naveen Chandra is the director of Vignan Foundation, which is recognized as a scientific and industrial research organization by DSIR New Delhi. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon. I am going to present the topic, the role of geospatial technology in public health. Next. Next. Malaria case study. Next. Back. Next. We have R&D institute in our Bellara GS startup company, and we have got R&D project sanctioned by Indian Department of Health Research, Indian Council of Medical Research. Malaria, the topic is the role of GS and satellite remote sensing for the environmental aspect of malaria, chikungunya, dengue in Dakshina Kannada district. In Mangalore city only, the malaria incident is very high, and in Karnataka state also, Mangalore city is the one of the largest incidence of malaria, and second is Chennai. And in district also, Mangalore city is compared to Dakshina Kannada district. This is a study area we have chosen, Dakshina Kannada district, and we have derived the GS mapping for the last 20 years from 2000 to 2020. What we have find is, in a rural area there is no malaria incidence as compared, but in Mangalore urban area it is a very high incidence of malaria incidence, and especially in the Mangalore Taluk and also in the malaria urban area, that is town municipality area. Next. And for 20 years we have derived the GS thematic maps. This is 21, and next. We have downloaded from the satellite imagery from the United States Geological Survey of Landsat, and for this we have need Mangalore urban area we have chosen because it covers largest incidence of malaria cases, and for this data we need many data from the satellite imagery. For the Indo-Japan project also we need for the 3 major districts, Kasaragod, Mangalore and Udupi, but here we have downloaded for Mangalore urban area. And this is the raw data earlier we have got, but after classification It is using digital image processing software. We have derived spatial thematic maps, and we have derived the earth features. And we can see from the 2000 to 2020, urbanization is more, that is red mark shows. And this is the dynamic changes studies we have carried out, and urbanization is improved from the vegetation cuttings. These are the elevation slope map and the way we have derived for the study area. And one of the tools is available in GS software is risk zone mapping for risk map zone map development for the public health decision making and priority setting for vector-borne diseases. The spatial information derived from malaria and risk zone will be prepared from these tools. Next. This is the methodology, risk factors. We have urbanization, soil, land use, land cover, and database we have generated. From that generated, we have derived the spatial thematic maps, and from the weightage overlay energy extension in the GS software, we have derived the risk zone mapping. These are the weightage given for the malaria incidents from the various land use, land cover thematic maps. And in 20 years, we have derived the GS thematic maps for the Mangalore Taluk as the malaria incidence is there, and southwestern region of the area is more concentrated incidence of radiation, and this district administrator and public health department has to concentrate on this area. This is again the malaria incidence is very high in town municipality area. The town municipality authorities have to concentrate on this area because Bandar, Hampankatta, Kinni, Derabail, that side is very high incidence. Only that much of concentration is required from the district authorities. This is the spatial modeling developed from the GS mapping using risk zone mapping. This is a case study. We have field work conducted in Bandar area where the high incidence of malaria. Next. This again chikungunya and dengue also is concentrated on the Dakshina Kannada district as compared to other districts of the Karnataka states, 52% in Dakshina Kannada. And similar data for the rural studies area we have conducted in Beltangadi Sulya Taluk area. Similar geospatial database we have derived for this rural area also. This is a public health center in the Mangalore Beltangadi. Each taluk we have derived various PH's health data. Field work is conducted in the chikungunya dengue. Because of the rubber plantation is more in Sulya Taluk and Beltangadi, the cases are more incidents we have found. Next. During COVID-19 also we have derived risk maps and we have given district authorities for the mapping, easy tracing of the COVID. This is Mangalore Taluk again, incidence of COVID map we have generated. Next. And in Udupi also we have derived the GS maps and hand over to the district authorities for controlling the diseases. And this is the Indo-Japan project. We have data given by the biochemistry department, and we have developed cancer location patient, and we identified using GPS survey. We have conducted in this one in cancer patients in the Mangalore district. Already we have derived the GS mapping for this project, and this also the cancer patients are observed in Mangalore urban area. Next. By clicking that information, we all get the pH and hemoglobin count, groundwater quality we will get from using GS software. These are the database we have created, supplied by the Department of Biochemistry, and we are linked. These are the non-spatial data, and we have integrated with the spatial and non-spatial data. These are predictable environmental for increase in cancer. We have predicted one is groundwater pollution, air pollution, urbanization, living style, climate change, temperature rise, sea erosion, deforestation, and increase in mobile tower, 3G, 4G, and 5G, and increase in chemical industry, increase in vehicle traffic, increase in electrical, and increase in chemical residential sites from agriculture. This is the WHO recognized as a cancer risk due to the continuous use of high radiation from the towers. This is the biological effects from the telecom towers, multiple resonance, locationalized heating results boiling in the blood and all. Next. These are the various effects from the telecom radiations. Next. These are the geospatial database derived from the GS software for identification of the risk zone due from the radiation effect. So green shows only the safety measure, and the black and yellow is the highest incidence of radiation impact is there in the study, Manipala case study. Next. These are the conclusion. Next. These are the spatial public health information system. In our startup, we are the modeling, we have innovation is going on to develop a spatial public health information. From the, there is no need to buy costly software. We can, anybody can land into the server and get the information. These are the public health GS we have conducted, and already identified location of cancer patients with environment factors using Gagan, this is ISRO data for the GEOS epidemiology reporting spatial press using paper is proposed. Next. This GS integration software is the world's largest integrated GS software. This is the GS CAD, another software. And the public health information systems. Next. Conclusion, geospatial technology can be used to overcome the greatest challenges in war against diseases. Healthcare community is using geospatial technology to understand the movements and the spread of infectious vector-borne diseases. Geospatial dashboard help to understand, track, analyze the spread of infected disease through real-time mapping. Geospatial mapping technology makes people around the world aware by tracing health threats through short, circular, smart watch for public health monitoring. Use of artificial intelligence and big data analytics, integrated GS, we can easily predict the modeling. Strong linkages between government, industry, academics for decision making. Capacity building awareness program need to be organized on health GS. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. As a token of our love and appreciation, may I now request Dr. Harish Kumar Madhyastha to present a memento to our speakers, H. Gangadhara Bhatt and Dr. Naveen Chandra. Thank you, sir. So with this, we have come to the end of this inaugural ceremony. I thank one and all for your valuable presence. Thank you once again.